Nishijou Takumi is a risless loser obsessed with 2D girls to the point of having delusions about them all day. His pathetic life takes a huge turn when he witnesses a girl nerfing someone. With that, Takumi decided to level up his game and find the root cause of this chaos. However, before any of this, Takumi lies wasted on the ground looking like dead meat when a pink-haired babe Rimi approaches him and summons a weapon. She points the weapon at his heart and then kisses him while he wonders when he can clap her. In the present, Takumi gets woken up in a container by a 2D girl who reminds him that he has to attend minimum classes to graduate at least. He attends the class where his classmate Daisuke invites him out to visit a site of one of the latest murders called New Gen where a beautiful girl is a suspect, but Takumi just ignores him. Later, he reads about the New Gen cases on the internet thanks to the link his friend sent him. His sister Nanami visits his den of foul smell, and he asks her to leave as she starts going about his things. She then asks him to buy a cell phone as per their dad's orders, but he refuses to go shopping with her, so getting annoyed with him, she leaves after calling him annoying a bunch of times. He suddenly feels someone is watching him, and just then, his online friend starts sending him a link to click repeatedly. He accidentally clicks a link and it shows a man murdered and staked to a wall. This creeps him out, so he spends the night playing games in a gaming cafe. As he walks back to his container, he comes across a scene straight out of a cheap horror movie where a pink-haired girl is plastering huge cross-like nails on a dead body, similar to the picture he saw earlier. The psycho chick turns around and says that she wanted to see him, which freaks him out, so he runs away to his container faster than Usain Bolt. Once safe, he convinces himself that he was having a delusion despite having one of the crosses in his possession. The next day, as he walks to school, he feels that somebody's following him, but when he turns around, he only comes across a prim-looking babe wearing glasses. After school, he comes across her again, and thinking that she's stalking him, he tries to run away and collides with a motorbike instead. The babe, who's called Yua, then asks whether he's okay and tells him that she's interested in him, which he finds hard to believe. Meanwhile, Nanami whines about Takumi to her friends. Yua takes Takumi to his container since his knee is injured, while he tells himself not to be deceived by a 3D girl. She starts going off about Sarah, who's Takumi's favorite 2D character, and Takumi begins showing off her figurines collection to her like a pro otaku. She somehow knocks over his CDs and notices the cross while cleaning things up, but rather than revealing anything to him, she instead asks him to come with her to an anime store to reserve a Sarah figurine with her. He thinks of declining her, but upon seeing her crying, he reluctantly agrees to go with her. The next day in school, much to his horror, the pink-haired girl from the murder site arrives at his class and sits beside him. Takumi gets stunned on seeing the girl and starts begging her to spare his useless good-for-nothing life, but she thinks he's just joking and tells him to stop being so mean. She reminds him that they are friends and even stares into his eyes, which causes him to suddenly remember her name, Rimi. Daisuke joins them and even reminds him how they have all been friends since first year by even showing him a picture. Later in his container, he sees a vision where a bloodied Rimi tells him that he can't get away from her. Suddenly, the real Rimi appears and tells him that she's come to visit him since he didn't look well before, but he forces her to leave. Meanwhile, the police discuss the New Gen murder and Inspector Suwa briefs the team about the suspect Takumi, who was caught on camera running away from the crime scene with a cross in his hand. Yua visits Takumi and they both leave to go to the anime shop to book the figurine. On the way, they meet Nanami, who mistakenly assumes that Yua is Takumi's girlfriend, but he tells her otherwise. They then shop for figurines and later he walks Yua to the station where she asks him his email address and reveals that she wants to become better friends with him. She immediately sends him an email when he reaches his container, which inquires when Takumi reaches school, but he decides to ignore her since he has zero clapping powers. She then visits his class the next day where Rimi reveals to her that he is absent. The next day, Takumi comes across her while walking to school, and she keeps talking to him despite his lack of replies. She then tells him that she likes him just as he is, which seems impossible for a pathetic loser like him who has never even touched grass. She then asks him to wait for her after school to walk home together and rushes off to her class. After school, he finds her in the courtyard waiting for him and they both then walk home together. On the way, they stop to watch a scene and Takumi notices a frog keychain on her bag. He realizes that the keychain resembles the one he saw in the gaming cafe on the murder night, and just then, Yua offers the keychain to him. Her bag accidentally falls down, spilling articles on the New Gen murders, and he realizes that the woman may be a crack-faced stalker after all. He tries to run away, but she grabs his hand and shows him the cross she found in his container. She then keeps pestering him about the murders, making Takumi realize that she thinks he's the new gen murderer. Letting go of his hand, she asks him whether he has precognitive powers and even shows him the picture of the murder that he had seen earlier. She then reveals that it was actually him who had sent the picture from the cafe, and gives him a file containing his log details, including proof that it was actually him who was Shogun and sending pictures to himself. Takumi recalls how his parents once stopped him from going on a school trip, so he drew a picture of the school bus and tore it apart. A few moments later, the bus crashed exactly the same way he had imagined it, but it hit him so hard that he stopped talking to people. In the present, he goes to a hospital and recalls the psychiatrist his mother took him, Dr. Takashina, with his assistant Heizuki, who helped him speak again. The doctor fails to recognize him and learns that Takumi came to check if he is sleepwalking. He suggests that Takumi should go to sleep while they observe him, so Takumi does so while getting consoled by his imaginary Sarah in a nurse outfit. He wakes up a few hours later and Heizuki reveals he didn't show any signs of sleepwalking. Meanwhile, Rimi gets terrified after hearing her classmates talking about horror movies because she is a tsundere, and goes to the library to get some books where she sees a girl reading spiritual stuff. Back in Takumi's shitty den, he wonders what's happening and he examines the picture Shogun sent him, which reveals that he is also in the picture. He checks the timestamp and realizes that it's really a picture from the future, so he starts freaking out. He suddenly recalls a phrase that says whose eyes are those, and recalls how he always felt like something was looking at him but thought that it was just God. Meanwhile, Yua thinks that Takumi might have multiple personalities that he himself is not aware about while Takumi tries to look into precognitive powers. He is led to a shitty occult page which talks about a band called Phantasm and its lead vocalist Fess. The forum says that Fess predicted the new gen murder in a song and called it the crucifixion of faith. He wonders if Fess is the real murderer, and the next day, he goes with Daisuke to their live performance. He starts hallucinating about Fess walking up to him with a giant sword, and he comes back to reality, but Fess still has the giant sword in hand. Fess suddenly says the phrase whose eyes are those, and Takumi starts freaking out before running away. The next day, he goes with Nanami to get a phone and sees another girl holding a big sword, which probably makes him wonder when the elf beauty will be added to the update. He goes back to his house and clicks on a link which leads him to an online auction called Vampire, selling pictures of the fourth new gen murder which is yet to happen. He opens one of the pictures and sees the same phrase that Fess said, which makes him wonder how everyone is saying the same phrase. Takumi plays games to distract his loser self from reality, but is soon brought back to Earth when he hears the words written on the wall. On his way back, he encounters a girl with the same big sword who realizes that Takumi can see it. She reveals that it's called a dai sword and introduces herself as Sina AI before leaving. Next day at school, Takumi meets Daisuke, who reveals that Fess is actually a girl from their school called Ais Kishimoto. Just then, Ais walks by but stops to tell Takumi to find his sword if he wants to be saved. The nerd buys a new Sarah figurine, but on his way back, he is stopped by Suwa and his senior, Yasuji Ban. They start to question him, and Takumi realizes that he wasn't stopped because he's a figure collecting otaku, but because he might be a suspect. Takumi confesses everything about what he saw, but the police think he's tweaking, and they record his address. Takumi finally gets home and unboxes the Sarah figurine, but his fleeting happiness is interrupted by Rimi. He thinks she's there to kill him for snitching, but she claims she's just there for the new figurine. Things get awkward between them when Takumi tries to take the figurine back from her, making her leave while blushing. Takumi is still suspicious of her, and the next day, he goes back to the hospital for another appointment with Takashina. Unfortunately for him, Takashina has started a remote job from home after collapsing from exhaustion. Later, Takumi goes to a shop to buy a dai sword after some online research, but the grass for brains gets scammed out of his money and buys a cheap counterfeit instead. Nanami catches Takumi in the wild with his new sword, and they go back home in the container. She peels him oranges akin to a true Imauto experience and asks what the bangles are for. Takumi tells her that they came free with the sword and she takes them as a gift from him. Takumi tells her to piss off if she's done so, naturally getting angry at him. She causes a ruckus and Takumi slips and breaks the sword. The next day, a new transfer student named Orihara joins the class and is relieved to see Takumi. Rimi later keeps pestering Takumi about Orihara and his love life, so he bolts from the scene like a dad going out to buy milk. Takumi takes a breather downtown, but his thoughts start spiraling and the risless nerd gets a case of anxiety. When he comes to, everyone around him is gone and the city is empty. He runs around looking for anybody but finds no one. Just as he is about to lose it, he finds a grandpa in a wheelchair who asks if Takumi got his message. The old man reveals that he is Shogun and that Takumi must awaken to save everyone from dying. Takumi is snapped back into reality by Rimi but turns on her and starts to yap out accusations, but she slaps him back into being humble, and he thanks her for saving him as he heads back home. Takumi dreams about Rimi where she asks him whether it's okay for her to wish. He wakes up to his 2D delusion of Sarah like a seasoned NEET, and then goes to school where he comes across the new student Orihara who falls down on the stairs. He ignores her and joins Daisuke and Rimi in the class instead, and they tell him that the detectives came to the school to investigate the list of students earlier. Just then, Orihara approaches him and gives him a bandage like a creep. Later, he notices AI carrying a D-sword in the crowd, so he rushes after her. He loses sight of her and instead noticing a weird chain in the street. He follows it to a train to find AI sitting there. Somehow he gets trapped with her and she inquires where Error is. She then begins a long yap session about how everything including humans are electronic devices and how human senses and their movements can be controlled since humans also run on nerve impulses which are similar to electricity. She then leaves after blabbing for an eternity. Meanwhile, Yua mails Takumi sometime later telling him that she's coming the next day to talk to him. To get away from the pathetic stalker, he decides to spend the next day at a cafe, but Yua finds him there and threatens him not to say a word. She then reveals that he actually has multiple personality disorder which is making him nerf people, and begins pleading with him to come to the hospital with her to stop his suffering. This freaks him out, so he knocks her over and then makes a run of it. He runs to the park where he notices that Yua is telling something to the police, and the police along with some people are coming after him, so he begins running again like his life depends on it. Ice finds him and leads him to an underground subway where Takumi starts whining about being the new gen murder suspect, which is his hobby at this point. She reveals that she's being suspected as well and then advises him to find his D-sword quickly. Once again, when he starts whining about his D-sword breaking, she conjures up a weird portal and brings out a D-sword of her own. She reveals that the sword is meant to interfere in a parallel world or the world of delusions and that it was created in that world as well. When he doesn't believe this, she asks him to turn around and he sees another Ice standing in a swimsuit just as he imagined her. Meanwhile, Inspector Suwa and Ban assess the murder site and Ban points out to Suwa that his coin is moving elliptically at the place of the murder. Ban then reveals that the Shibuya city had many areas where the gravity is unbalanced called the G-rate areas, and that they may be able to predict the next murder site by tracking such areas. Ice tells Takumi to find the sword on his own and then takes her leave. In his container, Takumi's online friend sends him a link of the murder perpetrator, and he opens it to find a group of people huddled together. One of the people turns around to ask the famous question, whose eyes are those, and the group then jumps off. This freaks out Takumi as always, but then he starts laughing as he realizes that Shogun was actually recording the video. The next day, Takumi wonders how he can get his D-sword quickly, and he recalls AI's words, which makes him realize that it might be possible to turn a person's imagination into image data too, which can be sent to someone's brain to turn a delusion into reality. He sees Yua standing outside his classroom, so he runs away screaming like a girl, and he meets Rimi in the courtyard. She consoles him and says that she is on his side, so she'll try to spend as much time with him as possible. They walk home together like a generic romance anime, and Takumi tells her about his encounter with Shogun, but she doesn't remember seeing anyone in a wheelchair. Suddenly, a protest against the new gen murders passes by them, but Takumi starts acting sissy again. They go back to his shitty den and Takumi researches on the theory he thought of, so he comes across a technology which works on the same principles he thought of. He wonders if he really has such a power and reminds himself that it's not scientifically possible, but wonders if it might be possible to bring out his D-sword using the same power. He picks up his broken toy sword to summon his D-sword, but he's not that guy. Remi stops him and suggests that he should throw that sword away because he's too old for such toys. He starts getting naughty delusions about Remi, but soon pops back to reality as she leaves to get some soda. He goes online only to learn that the 5th new gen murder occurred, and the victim this time is his old psychiatrist, Dr. Takashina. He starts freaking out again while fearing for his life and starts crying for Remi like the small girl he is, but she arrives on time to calm him down. He thinks about how Remi is the only thing keeping him from breaking down, That's why he shouldn't let her go. Somewhere else, AI finds a dazed crowd and an otaku-looking creep, so she destroys the machine in his backpack, which is revealed to be made by Nazomi Industries. The next day, Remy goes to Takumi and they go to school together, where Takumi asks Ayase for information and she tells him to change his perspective of the sword to find it. On way back home, he tells Remy how he might have the ability to turn delusions into reality, but she doesn't believe him, probably because she thought he is going through puberty. Meanwhile, Ban goes to investigator Mamos to learn more about the new gen murders, and she reveals that the gravitational error rate in their area is very abnormal. The person killed in the staking incident is revealed to be a professor who tried to talk about the G-raid on TV, and Mamos suspects that the current ruling party is covering up the new gen murders. Takumi gets a call from Shogun, but he only hears a strange tune from the other side, and suddenly an earthquake happens that creates a weird alarm-like noise throughout the city before the whole sky turns white. The city returns to normal and Takumi regains consciousness an hour later, while the news reports how almost 200 people died due to the earthquake. Takumi starts craving for some Remy time, so he goes to the school to find her and sees everyone gathered because Ayase is about to jump from the building. Ayase yaps about weird stuff, and that's why you shouldn't read weird books. Ayase walks off the building, and on the other hand, Nazomi Industries hold a meeting where it is revealed that the earthquake was due to one of their tests. Takumi runs away and AI asks him if he was the one who created the flower bed to save Ayase. He answers that he only imagined one, and AI says that his delusions were turned into a reality. She yaps about how the world is made 1 0, 1 second and -1, while the die sword is the shortcut to creating those -1 second, but Takumi is the only one who can create delusions with finding his die sword. Later, Nanami goes to Takumi's shithole and yaps about how Ayase jumped off the building like bro wasn't there. Rumors spread across school that Ayase tried to isekai herself because of Takumi, and this makes his social anxiety act up, but he starts hearing a girl's voice in his head. He gets beaten up by a few thugs on the way home who are hired by someone, and he wakes up to see Orihara standing in front of him with the thugs knocked out. They escape, and Takumi learns that the voice in his head was Orihara, who reveals that she also has a die sword. AI also appears, and she turns out to be Orihara's friend, who reveals that people like them are called gigalomaniacs. Meanwhile, at Nazomi, one of the guys reveals that they were able to create a mechanical gigalomaniac called Noah 2, and they use people called porters to carry Noah 2 seconds transmitter. Back to Takumi, who learns that Orihara wasn't the one who beat up those thugs, and just then a creep-looking excavator starts rampaging through the city. AI notices a few porters, and she and Orihara destroy their backpacks while explaining how the process of turning delusions into reality is called real booting. The excavator disappears and the people go back to normal. AI and Orihara explain how the die swords they're holding don't have a real body yet, so no one can see them, but that can be changed after the die swords are real booted. AI explains that die swords appear when a person experiences an extreme emotion. Meanwhile, the Nazomi Industries decide to deal with AI, and Orihara to stop them from interfering with their plans. AI tells Takumi that the Nazomi is using Noah 2 to create delusions, and Orihara says that they're now the gigalomaniac trio that will deal with Nazomi. She drags them to a photo booth to celebrate the creation of their group, which no one even cares about. Ban manages to get his hands on some CCTV footage in which AI is attacking some porters, and on the other side, Remy has yet to return to school after the earthquake. Orihara tries to convince Takumi to come with them to attack Nazomi, and she brings out the opus move of every woman as her last card. He drags her out to avoid any rumors, and AI tells him that he might also be targeted because he is a gigalomaniac. Takumi decides to go with them to see if Shogun is related to Nazomi. Meanwhile, Mamos deduces that the recent earthquakes were man-made using electromagnetic waves, and the ruling party is pressuring the media to stop them from reporting anything about the sky turning white. The gigalomaniac trio walks through the front door, and AI explains that the Noah 2 is being kept in the underground research facility, so they need to destroy it. They walk through the front door, and AI explains she used her die sword to make the security view them as company executives. Meanwhile, Remy goes to meet Shogun and tells him that Takumi needs to be erased, otherwise it will be dangerous for him, but Shogun says that he still has things that he wants Takumi to do. Back at Nazomi, the trio goes to the empty basement and finds Noah 2 in one of the rooms. The president of Nazomi, Noros, appears and says that he was waiting for the gigalomaniac girls that were attacking his porters. He calls AI by the name Sina Hatano, and they both real boot their die swords before attacking each other. AI manages to gain the upper hand in this legendary sword fight, and Noros realizes that Urahara must be telling AI his thoughts. He uses his dai sword to create mirrors around Urahara, which causes her to break down, and he reveals that she was a victim of a group stalking incident which used mirrors to traumatize her, causing her to lose the ability to speak. He also creates a dog which AI is terrified of, but she manages to escape and destroys the mirrors. They continue their fight using delusions, and Noros beats the living life out of them, which makes Takumi wonder why AI is trying so hard. He suddenly gets a flashback in which AI's father uses AI's mother as part of an experiment in Nazomi, which causes her mother to go crazy. Takumi comes back to reality and Ais arrives to rescue them. Ais freezes Noros and faints because she has yet to heal from her mighty rooftop jump. AI and Urahara start fighting each other, and Noros breaks out of the ice to explain that he used his power to make them view the other person as Noros. He steps toward Takumi to finish him as Takumi wishes for AI and Urahara to save him. He then unintentionally frees the two girls from Noros' delusion. Urahara manages to destroy Noah too when Noros disappears. Noros reveals through a speaker that they only destroyed a prototype of Noah 2 and a delusion of him created by that prototype. The trio decides to retreat, and Remy also returns to school the next day. Meanwhile, Noros is talking to someone tied to his dai sword and explains that he needs samples of gigalomaniacs to complete Noah 2. Ban and Mamos meet up with Yua, and just then Ban gets a call that the 6th new gen murder has occurred. Takumi learns about it at the same time and reads that 3 people were cut in half before their upper and lower bodies were switched and reattached. Takumi realizes that the victims this time are the 3 thugs that beat him up before and assumes that Shogun must be challenging him. He wonders why Shogun is using a phrase that he used to say, and he recalls writing an essay about it. He opens the essay and finds a Formula IR2 on it. He gets a call from Nanami asking for help, but he dismisses it as a prank while Yua and Ban share information. Yua tells him that Ais can pull swords out of thin air, and he presents video evidence of AI doing the same, with Takumi at the center of all these things. Takumi, Remy, and Daisuke go to the hospital to visit Ais, and Remy splits up to go to the washroom. They see Ais and Remy arguing in the courtyard but decide not to talk about it. Ais comes back to her room and starts yapping about how Takumi is one of the 7 knights who will save the world, which makes Daisuke's meat soft, so he leaves. She reveals that she went through psychological trouble to awaken her dai sword, which is probably why she talks crazy. Takumi gets another call from Nanami for help, and he returns to the shithole with Remy, where AI asks him if he created the IR2 equation. Takumi says yes, so she starts attacking him, and in the greatest plot twist of the history, the useless Remy takes out her dai sword to protect Takumi. She makes AI face a delusion of an old man, which causes AI to break down, and AI reveals that the death of her family and the current chaos is all because of the equation he created. Meanwhile, Noros reveals that the IR2 equation is the base of the Noah 2, and they need a few more gigalomaniac samples to fully activate the Noah 2. AI explains that anyone can use the powers of gigalomaniacs using that equation. Urahara reveals that the same old man told her that the boy who created the phrase is the most important, and AI rejoices that she can finally kill him. Takumi heads to his house to check up on Nanami, and Remy tries to stop him, but he doesn't listen. He is shocked to see that his house has disappeared, and on the other side, Shogun enters a hospital room which says Takumi's name on the outside. Takumi stands in disbelief as his house is nowhere to be seen, and Remy tells him that he is not supposed to exist as he is a fabrication. When he asks about it, Remy drops the shocker that Takumi himself is a delusion created by a gigalomaniac and was merely created a year ago. She then drops extra breaking news that he was created by the real Takumi Nishijou, who is acting as the Shogun. She embraces Takumi and tells him to stay in his room while she goes to save Nanami from her kidnappers. Remy leaves after telling the emo boy not to use his powers too much as it shaves off life of the real Takumi. Back in Mamos' office, they establish a connection between Nazomi Industries and the ruling political party, and also find that the Church of Natural Divine Light is also associated with them. Just then, Ban gets a call from Suwa, who sounds like he just caught a whooping, and Suwa says that he's in Tokyo General Hospital. Ban runs off to save him, and meanwhile, Remy talks on phone with the real Takumi and promises that she will settle everything. Ban arrives at the hospital where he meets Heizuki, who, sounding distressed, tells him that a suspicious man went to the roof. Yua reaches the hospital and she finds a familiar-looking face at the door. Her dead sister Mia. Mia vanishes inside and Yua quickly follows her. Meanwhile, the idiotic copy sits at his computer and goes through an identity crisis which might be justified this time. Nanami knocks on the door, but Takumi quickly realizes that it's just a delusion and asks her to kill him. Inside the hospital, Yua finally catches up with Mia, but the ghost confronts her and gaslights her into thinking that she was responsible for Mia's murder. The delusion successfully hypnotizes Yua and leads her to the rooftop edge. Ban finds Suwa on the adjacent rooftop, but Suwa betrays him and fills his body with lead. The injured Ban asks why Suwa would shoot him, and Suwa tells that it's all for the Church of Divine Light, before shooting another round. Yua wakes up from the trance and Mia tries to kill her. As she struggles, Yua activates her gigalomaniac powers and quickly deals with the delusion. The delusion turns out to be a porter, and Ice appears from the dark and destroys his transmitter. Meanwhile, Nanami's delusion tries to cheer up Takumi, but the identity crisis is too strong for it. Rimi reaches the Nazomi Industries, where she finds Nanami tied up by Noros. Due to the physical injury of her hand and pain of losing Bangle, Nanami unlocks her gigalomaniac powers. Meanwhile, Noros flexes casually and says that Nazomi Industries can easily make gigalomaniacs now. Noros displays his aura as he disarms Rimi through psychological damage X100, and she surrenders without a fight. Dejected, Takumi walks through the city and around him. Chaos ensues as everybody starts fighting each other. While it looks like all hope is lost for the loser Imo, Shogun appears and gives him a pep talk like Uncle Ben. Shogun tells him that the chaos is being caused because Noah 2 is on operation, and that Takumi is the only one who can stop it. Shogun admits that he is the real Takumi and is responsible for Takumi's creation. He tells Takumi that he created him because he couldn't move his body, but Takumi doesn't care about that and asks Shogun to kill him. Shogun tells him that Rimi was captured while trying to save Nanami, and a flashback is shown where Shogun showed Supreme Riz and saved Rimi from darkness by showing her the bright blue sky. Shogun tells Takumi about Noros and reveals that Rimi went in alone to protect Takumi because she started having feelings for him. Takumi remembers all the acts of kindness Rimi shows her, and the blockhead finally realizes that he's in love. He claims that even if he was fake, the emotions he felt were real, and tells Shogun that he'll save the world not for his sake, but to move forward. Takumi finally unlocks his Dai Sword, and Shogun guides him to destroy the porter's transmitters. He uses Ultra Nerd Instinct to weed out the porters from the crowd and takes them out one by one. Takumi finds the last porter, and it turns out to be Heizuki the nurse. He reads her memories and projects them on the screens, which reveal that she was the true culprit behind the murders, and also Takumi's online friend Grim. Heizuki reveals that everything she did was for the founder of the Divine Light Church. She takes out a stake from her bag and isekai herself in the neck, which brings forth the third melt, generating massive earthquakes all around Japan. Ice and Yua meet up with Nanami amidst ruins, and Nanami tells them that Rimi is in trouble. Suddenly, the ground cracks open beneath them and they fall inside helplessly. Takumi finds an unconscious Shogun and carries him on his back, as self-love is most important. He finds Ice in a hole and uses his powers to save the girls. Walking up to Nanami, he tells her that he's not her real brother. Nanami remembers her actual memories of her brother Shogun and embraces him with tears in her eyes. Shogun tells her that Takumi and he are the same, and she goes and tells Takumi that he'll stay her brother no matter what. As they resolve to go and save Rimi from Noros, big monsters burst out of the people and attack Takumi, but the girls save him and tell him to move on without him. Ai and Orihara meet the old man in the subway, who turns out to be Ai's father, responsible for performing experiments on Ai's mother and sister. He jumps in and acts as Ai's meat shield from getting shot by Suwa, a little late for fatherly love. The old man says some typical wise guy words before perishing, and Suwa deploys delusions for both Ai and Orihara, but Takumi joins the circus in and breaks Orihara's delusion. Suwa quickly takes the upper hand, piercing him with stakes, and Takumi thinks that he is powered by his backpack. One more stake and Takumi is dead meat, but he reverses the situation in the nick of time using delusion synchronization, and transfers all his stakes into Suwa's body. Takumi notes that Orihara is all of a sudden able to speak while Ai weeps for the worst father of the year. She begs him to destroy Noah 2, and he gives them his word. In the dreamlike place, Shogun tells Takumi about his terminal disease and assures him that he won't die when Shogun passes, as he's a separate being now. He leaves the rest to him and disappears. The founder of the church and the leader of the ruling party link up with Noros as all the scum gather in one place. Noros ruins the party and says that the whole pie is his, as he will control Noah 2 alone like a god. He then gets rid of them both as Rimi wakes up from her sleep while in the tunnel. Takumi suddenly faces delusions of Sarah, who attacks him. Ice, Yua, and Nanami join up with Ai and Orihara in the underground subway. Ai wonders if it's right to cry for a dad like hers, but Ice comforts her and says it's alright. The girls prepare to catch up to Takumi while Takumi finds his way to Noros after dealing with Sarah. He tells Remy that he's there for her and confesses his love for her in the most romantic setting available. Noros tries to influence Takumi with his speech on morals and paints him a picture of a world without people's negative thoughts. The MC obviously rejects his ideas, so Noros quickly gets to work and starts a battle with Takumi to extract his code sample in order to finish Noah 2. Takumi tries to destroy Noah 2, but all his attacks automatically reverse due to its self-defense powers. Noros swiftly disarms Takumi and puts him under a heavy delusion attack involving Remy's betrayal. He drives a skate through Takumi in the delusion. Takumi hallucinates about a normal life after the earthquake, in which life is sunshine and biscuits, where all of the girls are madly in love with him. His hallucinations quickly end when in the real world, Noros shoots Remy with an old-fashioned land of the free gun. This turns out to be another delusion as Takumi finally snaps free, just to be put under another delusion where he is reduced to a set of eyeballs. This looks to be troublesome for him, but Shogun shows him a vision of the girls working together to find him, and the ensuing Nakama power finally grants him freedom from the delusion. The real battle against Noros begins, and Noros can't land a single attack because Takumi has transcended his physical body, as even his gi sword can't land a hit. The girls find a river underground containing dimensional energy, and they all activate their swords, which makes the water rise. The water reaches Takumi and Noros, and it freezes Noros like ChäoS's powers did. Takumi then imbues his sword with a serpent laced with anti-particles combined with Remy's power, and chucks it at Noros like a dart throw in the dark. The attack finds its target and the Noah 2 machine 2 as Takumi gets 2 birds with 1 stone. The machine disappears and the scene at the start begins to happen. Remy approaches him in the rain and makes up a weapon. She points the weapon at his heart and then kisses him. She confesses her love for him and he reciprocates her feelings. The skies clear as the girls find the lovebirds and everything restores back to normal. However, is everything really over? Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel for more content.